Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to join the webinar on the future of asset management in China, co-hosted by FleishmanHillard and ChatLabs. Today, we'll be sharing the insights for our recent report published by FleishmanHillard on the future of asset management industry in China, together on the analysis of the WeChat account by different asset managers by ChatLabs. Just a quick introduction of the speakers today. I'm Patrick Yu, GM of the FleishmanHillard Hong Kong office. I also run the Asia-Pac Finance Practice Group in the region. Joining me today will be Cheryl Pan, Vice President of BlueCurrent Hong Kong, the digital arm of FleishmanHillard, and our WeChat partner, Tom Kruger, VP of Strategy at ChatLabs as well. Before we go into the details of our findings, let's have a quick look on the asset management industry in China. As you may know, despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the geopolitical tensions in China, the local industries continues to grow. They have just hit close to $3.5 trillion as at June 2021. Year-on-year growth in 2020 was record high at 34%. We have also recently seen one of the largest asset manager recently launched a retail fund in China, raising $1 billion, which is an extremely exciting development for overseas asset manager penetrate into the retail onshore markets due to the recent regulations change for the regulator to allow overseas asset manager to have 100% ownership of their local units. On other regulation fronts, we are also excited to see the development of Wealth Management Connect scheme. While the blueprint is still under development, it presented a huge opportunity for overseas asset manager to distribute their products through their banks in China and vice versa in Hong Kong as well. This will be a huge market for the high net worth individual in Greater China. With that, FleishmanHillard, under our research arm True Global Intelligence, has conducted an online survey of 260 Chinese investment professionals in mid-July. This is the first survey that we did to understand the appetite and behavior on Chinese investors, especially on their attitude and perceptions towards overseas asset managers. All of the respondents have at least invested in one of these investment products, whether it's on equities, fixed income, or ETF. So before we go into deeper dive on some of the key findings, let's share with you some of the really top line overview. From the investor standpoint, credibility and performance continue to be the key factors for them to pick an asset manager. This year, we have particularly included one question on ESG on how is it relevant for them to choose the asset manager. No surprise, this ranked number 3 as the most important factor for people to pick the asset manager in China. In terms of what Chinese investors are interested in, they show huge interest in the onshore retail funds by the overseas asset managers. Despite the fact when we did the survey, there's no retail fund in that market by asset managers. This has already shown Chinese investors has huge interest in some of the new products by the overseas players in the market. In terms of their investment appetites, investors are interested in global, China, and Hong Kong focused equities fund as well. When we ask further, what overseas managers can do better in China, transparency in communications and fee disclosure continue to rank really high in this year's findings. The other really outstanding figure is about the ESG product offerings, which is one of the top criteria for people to think that overseas managers should do much better in China. So let's look deeper in the ESG components. As we all know, it has become such an important subject for all the asset managers, asset owners, and different industry players in the asset management industry. Same in China as well. We have found out that 95% of the investors actually show very high interest and think that it's very important or somewhat important for an overseas asset manager to have strong ESG product offerings. And 53% thinks that commitment of an asset manager to ESG is very, very important. When we ask further, will they really actually purchase ESG products? 38% are actually saying that they are very, very interested. This has shown that ESG has become such an important subject and area for all the asset managers, whether you're a local, overseas player, to continue to put extremely high focus to expand your commitments, whether it is on sustainability, governance, and also climate change areas, to show that you are understanding the investors' interest. We talk about the interest in overseas players' products. 95% of the investors say that they will be extremely interested or very interested in the retail funds offered by the overseas asset managers. While currently there's only one product in the market, however, we have already seen a number of key players. They are actively applying the FMC license in China, hoping to launch the product in the next few months. It will be an extremely interesting development to see how these products will perform versus other products by local players and overseas players. On other products tailored for the Chinese investors, QDLP, PFM continue to draw the interest among Chinese investors. Most of the reasons why investors are interested in these products by the overseas managers, because they found out that these products, they will have more unique strategies, and also the performance will be relatively better than similar products in the local markets by the local managers. One particular interesting insight that we found out that is management fee may not be the key focus area when investors choose these products. They think that as long as the fund manager can provide unique strategy and also a clear investment focus on the asset class that they are interested, management fee may not be a key concern for them, even they may be higher than some of the local products by the local managers. This is something that all the asset managers need to consider when they launch their products to see what really excites the investors' interest when you launch some unique products in the market. We talk about, what kind of products that investors in China are interested. Obviously, due to the ongoing pandemic and geopolitical tensions, people are looking for less risk products. Global focused, Hong Kong or China focused products are something that people are more keen in terms of investing in the next 12 months. People are looking for diversification to achieve a risk-adjusted returns in their portfolio in the future. We also ask further in terms of how geopolitical tensions and pandemic really affect their investment appetites. Obviously, while we can't control what these factors will continue and how this will affect the economy, we see that investors in China become more risk aversive in the next 12 months. 53% of investors consider to move more or some of the investments into lower risk options as compared to 46% in 2020. However, when they ask about pandemic, people are slightly more upbeat and confident about the situation, given the government efforts to continue to contain the pandemic in an effective manner in China. We have also asked further in terms of the communications and also what kind of channel Chinese investors are interested. We'll go through that with my team, Cheryl and Tom, to talk about how WeChat can play that role as well. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Patrick. Some of you might have read from the report. One of the key takeaways from this year's findings is actually more attention to digital communications. We are seeing continued enthusiasm and growing use of social media to know more about the companies and also the investment products among Chinese investors. 45% of the respondents said they refer to different kinds of online channels for information, and WeChat stands out as the go-to channel picked by more than 1/3 of Chinese investors who participated in the survey. This reaffirms the importance of WeChat for asset managers as an essential channel for marketing and communications in China. So let's take a look at this platform in a closer lens. WeChat is by far arguably the most popular social media channel in China with 1.2 billion monthly active users. WeChat is more than just an app. It's an ecosystem that pretty much has it all, from messaging, business management, payment, to daily life services. And it constantly evolves with more and more functions. From the user's perspective, because of the massive user base and the rich offering, to many people, WeChat is super sticky. And that's why 90% of Chinese professionals consider WeChat as the first choice for their daily work communication. And about 390 million people are actually using WeChat for finance-related information or activities because it's just so convenient to get the latest information, manage their financial accounts, or even complete transactions through the platform. From the brand's perspective, WeChat offers many opportunities for brand communications through official accounts, which are created for brands, organizations, media, and individuals for public information sharing and interaction. There are more than 20 million used ones of them now, and users are quite receptive of official accounts. About half of WeChat users are actually following between 10 and 20 official accounts. This is a very positive message, meaning that the audience could respond well to the brands through these official accounts. The figures do sound amazing, but we probably would still wonder why WeChat for asset management and how is that relevant? Let's look at the screen now. While the large user base speaks for itself, WeChat particularly dominates mainland China and has a very high penetration rate in Hong Kong, and is widely used by private bankers and high net worth individuals as well. And the ways WeChat can be used to engage with these target groups are diverse and can be very creative. We have seen very engaging approaches adopted by the asset managers, such as like using HTML5, which is quite commonly used in China. It's WeChat friendly by nature with animated pages where the brands can introduce the products, drive leads, attract event signups through compelling visuals, videos as games, or even short films. There are interactive campaigns where some asset managers would call for votes and give away wrap packets electronically through WeChat as well. You can add in the trendy technology like AR or VR to the HTML5 to create immersive brand experience too. Recent years have also seen a great hit of mini programs. You can think of them as apps in lighter versions within WeChat, so people don't have to download the apps separately and everything can just run easily inside WeChat. There are 3 million mini programs now. Some asset managers are using them for customer services, product education, and CRM, etc. Another thing that's definitely on the rise is short video content. WeChat created its own short video platform called WeChat Channels or 视频号, and it has attracted more than 30 million accounts now. Interestingly, based on the data, currently more brands are using WeChat channels for video sharing than creators or general users. This means brands are very actively exploring this new function for communications, and this is true with the financial institutions too. We have seen quite a few asset managers have set up WeChat channels to publish video content for thought leadership building, product education, and general branding. The landscape is getting competitive, but the variety of things that can be done through WeChat do provide very good opportunities to asset managers to tell a brand story and build a relationship with the Chinese investors in an effective way. That said, it doesn't have to be like super fancy or that sophisticated all the time. With all things considered like compliance, regulations, you might still just want to focus on information, sharing, or education. WeChat's different functionalities and features offer very different layers of engagement, so you can always consider and pick what works best based on the stages you are at when it comes to using WeChat for marketing and communication. build it, and then scale it when the time is right. Looking at the slide now, I know it's 2021 now, and content is king might sound too or familiar, but it's still quite relevant and so important for WeChat. Last year, the most followed WeChat official accounts are news-oriented ones, which again shows Chinese audiences do want to see useful information on WeChat, and they would expect the account to be informative and valuable for them. Back to the asset management survey, we see a similar trend as well. Almost 3/4 of the respondents have used WeChat to access corporate information, and that actually represents a significant increase from that in the previous year. The strong interest indicates possibilities for asset managers to make corporate information as one of the content pillars. It could be the company's latest happenings globally or the news in China, the investment philosophy, capabilities, strengths, efforts, etc. As Patrick mentioned earlier on, Chinese investors value more transparent communications. So it would be good to take the opportunity to let the Chinese investors know you better through WeChat. Thought leadership, product information, and investor education continue to be some of the biggest content areas the Chinese investors are interested in. We've noticed content with timely newsworthy topics, locally relevant angles, and insightful perspectives, even sometimes in a longer form, is quite well received. Pieces on outlooks, market commentaries, points of view could also be considered. For the education-related content, there are more and more asset managers using short videos, like creating a theme-taught series like such and such fund 101, or having their fund managers to do Q&As on the videos. The percentages of diversity and inclusion and CSR content have both increased this year. This would likely have something to do with the pandemic, where people generally wanted to see more feel-good content. A series of cultural matters that happened last year, which triggered more discussions about diversity, equality, and inclusion, and commitment to carbon neutrality worldwide, and greater interest in ESG, as Patrick just mentioned. We also noticed that social media users would love to see the brand's longer-term commitment to the local community they are operating. So we've seen more purpose-driven campaigns and content on WeChat since last year. Having authentic stories and keeping the human touch will have a positive impact on communicating about the brands in the long run. So hopefully these findings will give us some good inspirations in terms of forming a holistic content strategy, addressing Chinese investors' interests, building more trust, and elevating the brands through WeChat. I'm now gonna pass it to Tom to talk about WeChat from another perspective.
Thank you, Cheryl. So with that, I think Cheryl and Patrick have done a great job at kind of laying the foundation of what do investors want to see, what does the market outlook look like, and now I want to take a more granular approach and start to look at really how do the users in China, how do the Chinese users, the Chinese investors really use WeChat from a day-to-day, and then what are some key recommendations that we'd make to firms that are looking to really expand their operations in China and really expand their digital footprint on WeChat. So with that, next slide. I think it's important before we jump into, WeChat. I think, as Cheryl mentioned, WeChat is the most dominant app in China. It's one of the most used apps in the entire world. But if you've been to China, you know that China is the land of super apps. And I think I would be amiss if I didn't mention the growing ecosystem that China has of brands like Meituan, brands like Douyin, ByteDance, and ByteDance community. Of course, you have the Alibaba community of things like Tmall and Taobao. And their growing apps in travel and also in fintech. You have the Didi, you have Baidu, you have Xiaohongshu. You really have an ever-growing list of these super apps. And I think I say apps lightly. It's really an ecosystem that these tech companies have built. And I think what's really important to know is that despite how much traction these other super apps have grown and really gained over the past few years, WeChat still holds a very, very important place in the overall ecosystem in China. Next slide. And really what we see is that, as Cheryl mentioned, WeChat, it's a super app like many other apps that I just showed. And when we compare WeChat to the West, for those of you who haven't been to China and used WeChat, we typically compare it to the messaging components of WhatsApp and Skype, the social components of maybe a Twitter or an Instagram. It has professional connection capabilities like Slack and Microsoft Teams. You have all of the e-commerce and shopping functionalities built right in. You have peer-to-peer payment transfers. You can pay for your utilities. You have transportation capabilities. What I like to say is that WeChat has a piece of the every day of the user's journey. And so, for example, when I want to go purchase something from the store, I pay with WeChat Pay. When I want to order a taxi to go home, I order that with WeChat. If I need to send my wife money, I do it on WeChat. You can apply to get married on WeChat. You can apply for divorce on WeChat. My wife is pregnant with our second child, and she actually can get blood results and ultrasound results directly on WeChat platform itself. And so everything that you want to do, you can now do on WeChat, and it's very much an operating system. But as we go to the next slide, I want to really hone you in on something that's very, very important. Despite WeChat having all of these capabilities, I think it's really key that we remember that WeChat was built as a messaging platform. WeChat really grew to fame and power in China, not because of all of the other functionality it had, but really because at the time, SMS was really expensive. And if you're a student at college, sending out SMS and getting billed for each SMS that you would send, that's pricey, and that adds up over time. WeChat, on the other hand, really grew because you could connect on Wi-Fi. You could call and chat for free over WeChat over Wi-Fi, which is readily available everywhere in China. And WeChat as its core, because it really grew up as a messaging app, the messaging components of WeChat still reign supreme. Despite all of the other super apps and all the other functionalities on WeChat, messaging is really at the core of why WeChat is still as powerful as it is. Next slide. And I think it's really important to remember that, because on WeChat, it's not just another social media channel. It's not just another community page or brand page that you maintain that you apply a certain budget to for content. WeChat's different because as we look at my WeChat homepage, this is my WeChat screen here, you'll see that on my WeChat homepage at the very top, you have my wife. Below that, you have some of my work chats. At the very bottom of that, I even talk to my parents on WeChat. But nestled within that friends and family and work chats that I have, you'll notice that there's a brand. And that brand occupies the same space as all my friends and family. And I even get notification bubbles for every message that that brand sends me. And I think this is really important to remember the user experience of WeChat, because on WeChat, like I said, you're no longer just another fan page. On WeChat, you are very much a friend of the people that subscribe and follow you. And that's really, really key as we remember, how do we want to engage the user on WeChat? Next slide. And so with that, in terms of how do you then expand that friendship, there's a few key touch points that we can look at. One of those key touch points is going to be content marketing, and that's done through what's called the WeChat official account, or WeChat service account is typically what's referenced. The second type of communication that you can use to expand that friendship is going to be WeCom. And WeCom, or formerly known as WeChat Work, is kind of the enterprise level chat solution that WeChat and Tencent offer. And that allows you as the brand to have a one-on-one relationship with your investor or your partner, and all of those conversations and interactions can be archived. And then last but not least, another kind of touch point that's important is going to be the mini program. And that's typically compared to what you do on iOS or Android apps, or maybe even a web app. You can now do directly inside of the WeChat framework, built out into a mini app or a mini program. And you can use it for a host of services, some that we're going to look at in a second. Next slide. And so now, in terms of how do we then properly engage consumers, I think there's a few things. Where do you start? I always recommend that a brand entering China or a foreign firm that's going to be leveraging WeChat, that you start with a WeChat service account. This is where you build that friendship. This is what's going to be on the homepage of the user's WeChat account. You can do things like customer service chats, and you can have one-on-one chats with a live agent, or you can have one-on-one chats with a chatbot or an autoresponder. You want to have links to different experiences. So being able to offer different content jump links, or even content marketing directly in WeChat, the service account is going to be the best place to do that. And so always start with the WeChat service account, and then you can build up from there. Next slide. Now, what we did, and what I want to jump into now, is actually a study that we released earlier this year, which is over 30 asset management firms. And it's an analysis of all of the different content and different ways that they leverage WeChat. And what we did was we actually ranked, of these 30 brands, how many of those 30 brands are doing well. And then from 1 to 31, we ranked them in order of how well they perform in comparison to the rest of the market. So let's look at a few insights from that now. Next slide. So the question is how well do foreign firms use WeChat? And what we found, apologies, my 1-year-old's a little bit loud in the background. What we found was that foreign firms don't do so hot compared to Chinese firms and local firms. What we found was that of the brands, the average score for a foreign firm was about 8.9, and that's out of a score of 30 that we put. Now, if you look at our spider chart on the right, you'll look at kind of where they place, and they did well in comparison of search, but there's a lot of room to be desired when it comes to the live chat experiences or the automated support or customer data binding or even the educational experiences or the automations that a lot of the local Chinese firms run. Foreign firms definitely lag behind, and so there's a big room for improvement there as we look at that. Next slide. Now, the other thing that we looked at is what type of content is being engaged by the firms. And what we found was that about 34% of the content being shared by the brand on WeChat is announcements related to the firm. And so that could be an upcoming webinar, that could be some sort of firm change. The next highest was about 30% of all content, and that's market analysis. Behind that, at 17% was upcoming events. At 10%, and only 10%, was education. And then about 9% was just general news. Now, if we compare that, go to the next slide. If we take a look at kind of where we see the bulk of content, most of it is in those two categories, which is market updates and then market analysis. And while that's great, and while I think that a lot of consumers want to hear about that, I think something that Cheryl shared earlier, which was about the investors in China, they really want to keep up to date with who is your firm and really the firm history. And that's something that we found a lot of foreign firms actually aren't posting. A lot of foreign firms aren't leaning into their brand history or their place in the market or how well they've established themselves through not just 4 or 5 years, but really through decades and even 100+ years that they've been around and in the market. And I think there's a lot of room for firms to really start to build a better brand awareness through WeChat in ways that they haven't done before. Because I think a lot of content being posted by firms today is very much saturated in that market analysis where you can really double down, differentiate yourself by really sharing your brand history. On top of that, I think the other thing that we really would recommend is build out educational content. The Chinese consumer in China is very much the most educated and sophisticated consumer out there. Whether it's purchasing luxury goods, purchasing home goods or baby goods, they are the most up to date, they're the most educated, they do their most research, and they're really looking for the firms that they want to invest in to be able to share not just market analysis, but also help to educate them to become a more educated and advanced investor. And when we look at kind of what the consumer wants, really getting that content from WeChat, the local Chinese firms do a very great job at educating and helping to build awareness within their follower base, and something that I think foreign firms can really learn from. Next slide. So as we come in for a landing, I just want to share 3 key observations that we have in terms of where you can look to invest more and really where you can grow. Next slide. So the first key for us is identify and acquire. So how do you better identify your followers? That's really the base of what we want to lay for a foundation. And the way that you can do that, here's an example of a firm that we saw. This is China Asset Management. And directly within WeChat, embedded into their WeChat service account, you can actually create an account. You can also bind your personal information to their WeChat account. You can verify your eligibility for using that account. And throughout WeChat, the entire account opening process, as well as your initial data binding, so identifying who you are and what type of content you want, is all done within WeChat. And so that gives the firm great visibility into who follows and subscribes to their content. The second key is engaging through automation. One of the keys of WeChat, as I said, about building that personal relationship, is actually personalizing your content based on who follows your account. And one of the cool things that WeChat allows through their APIs is you're able to then personalize a one-to-one relationship. So for example, for this account that we saw in our report, when you follow that account, it actually personalizes the welcome message with your WeChat nickname, which is a nice touch on personalization. It then will actually ask you a series of questions to better understand who you are. So for example, one is here, how old are you? And that gives you different date ranges. And from that, it actually will personalize the content that it recommends to you based on kind of your stage in life, your different positions in life, to really help better tailor the content and tailor the WeChat experience to what you as a consumer and investor want to see. And that's a great way to really build that friendship. The third key for us is going to be building unique experiences. Like I said, education is key, and Chinese consumers want to be educated and they want to learn themselves. And so this is a great way to do it. This is a brand that we saw that actually uses WeChat and has a mini loyalty program built out where you can get points for checking in every day. And then you can use their different calculator and their different tools. You can read different content. And then they also have their live streams available directly within WeChat. And you can also replay historical live streams as well. So that's a great functionality and a great way to really educate, inform, and really engage your audience, something that investors and Chinese consumers really need to see and want to see in WeChat. So as we come in for a landing, I think one key takeaway I'll give you is a question that I get from a lot of brands today is, who do I need to bring to the table to really build a robust WeChat ecosystem? And what I want to encourage you is, across these three key touch points that I just shared, think about bringing in first your CRM team. WeChat is about relationships, and you need to bring in your CRM team to build that relationship. The second, in terms of engagement, is bring in your marketing team. Really have a holistic view of the content you want to build out, and then a holistic view of the strategy on how you want to educate and engage your consumers. And then last but not least, think about bringing in a product management team to start building out unique experiences, whether through short video or through live streaming and webinars, or even through mini programs and mini games. And think about your product management team to help build out those experiences over time and really give the consumer what they want to look for in terms of a WeChat experience. So with that, that is all that I have today. If you want, you can go ahead and you can actually engage me on WeChat. That's my WeChat QR code. Feel free to scan that, and we'll make sure that you get the report from today, and then the more detailed brand ranking that we're going to share later on of the 31 brands that we took a look at. But feel free to scan my QR code, and great to connect today.
Thank you, Tom and Cheryl. Before we close the webinar for the Q&A, I just want to summarize a few comments and thoughts by all the speakers today. Whether you are new to the market or you have been already in China for some time, I think there are four key elements that you have to consider. One, ESG. I think we have emphasized a lot in terms of how this is important, not only on a global basis, also in China. With the Chinese government fully focusing on achieving carbon neutrality, I think there will be more regulations and also commitment, from the regulator, and also different standard and disclosure for the asset managers to comply in China. And what the asset manager need to consider is they have to go beyond what the regulatory requirements are needed. Think through all the E, S, and G. People always talk about environmental, social, but governance is also really, really important. How different asset managers, vote for different companies on their governance is also something that, many investors are looking at. Second is always getting prepared. While the government and the regulator has relaxed the regulations in terms of how foreign players can operate in China, there might be other changes down the road. Some may be favorable for the asset managers, some may not be so favorable. So you always to have a game plan in terms of different scenarios to prepare, whether it's geopolitical challenges, taxation, even the latest, digital security law. Make sure that you have a team on the ground to understand the local complexity and how that would dictate, what's your go-to-market strategy, marketing, advertising, PR, digital, and social, and how that could relate back to your global headquarters. We spent quite a lot of time today on WeChat. I think everyone agrees that digital communications, it will be key. It doesn't mean that it will replace all the IFA distributors or agents in China, but you have to have a digital strategy. Whether it's a WeChat, Weibo, or Douyin, or other social platform, you have to use a platform that really engage your target audience. Not just only on education, thought leadership, Cheryl talked about video. We also understand some of the asset managers have some H5 games as well. Just think through what your customers and investors like, and that will really help you to stay ahead of the curve. Last but not least, I know we talk about a lot of digital and so on, but human touch, human interaction still is one of the key attributes that investors are looking at. When we ask about the investors in China, while they rank digital communications really, really high, they still use a lot of the intermediaries, IFA, in terms of getting information and also products purchase in terms of fund industry. So while you have all these digital channels, make sure that you really educate all your distributors, IFA, in terms of what this kind of product and strategy really help to address your investors' concern. Are they concerned about the risk? Are they concerned about the inflation? Or are they concerned about the return and so on? This will help you to complement your ongoing effort in digital communications. With that, very excited to share a lot of thinking, research, and insight with you. Between ChatLabs and Fleshman, we have worked with different companies, asset managers, to enter China or further amplify their presence in terms of engaging their customers. So if you have any questions, we can open the floor for the Q&A now. Thank you very much.
Great. Patrick, I see a few Q&A. Do you want me to read those off?
Yeah, that would be good.
First question here that I see, it says, for Japanese firms to set up a WeChat account in WeChat, seems that there are any regulatory requirements by Chinese government. Do we need to use representative companies? How much does it cost? Maybe Patrick or Cheryl, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you. Cheryl,
yeah,
if you can
sure.
take down that would
So currently WeChat has allowed the entities with foreign business registrations to create their WeChat accounts as well. So they would have a different of procedures for you to follow, and usually the registration fee is around like US dollars, like 99. So you just need to submit all the required documents, so that would be fine. But then we've also seen some companies, just to sort of ease out the burden of managing all the paperwork. There are also companies who are actually partnering with their Chinese partners to finish all the registrations as well. So there are like two approaches you can take for that.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Another question coming in. So one from Michael. It says, hi, thanks for a great presentation. I saw it was mentioned in the slides before, but what formats of the content, aside from H5 pages on WeChat, are most common, and what would attract more Chinese investors?
So I think, apart from HTML5 in general, I think, from the brand building and also awareness raising perspective, using the WeChat official accounts to share the regular updates and also sharing the thought leadership pieces would be quite important as well, just so you can keep your prospects updated of what's going on in your company and also in the industry. In terms of the format, I think as mentioned, short video content has definitely, been on the rise. So that would be something we want to consider as well. We've seen a lot of asset managers using the short video content to educate what's going on about the companies and also in the industry. That's something we want to keep an eye on as well. And we've also seen some asset managers actively use WeChat for customer services and also building that interactions as well. Some asset managers have also created their own WeChat groups where the fund managers and also their supporting employees are also in the group to host like live streaming for important updates, and also help them to answer different questions as well, just so they can build their own communities on WeChat. And that kind of like, human interactions, as Patrick just mentioned, that will help to, really build the trust and also continue that relationship as well. So that's something we've observed from the recent WeChat activities.
That was a great response. Next question I got, and I think I can take this one. It says, what WeChat experiences should foreign firms consider deploying to WeChat? And I think that's a great question. One thing I'd add there in terms of what experiences that you can enable, one of the key that comes to mind from our research is really think about using an LMS, a learning management system. I think a lot of content that firms have is really related to education, whether that's an existing white paper that you have, an annual report that you run, or in some cases, maybe a global LMS. But as you localize to China, you can actually build directly in WeChat, maybe a mini program that's hosted for education and is really focused solely on that purpose. And you can build out even gamification. Chinese consumers really do like gamification as an element of engagement. And so quizzes and courses that they can take, maybe leaderboards against their friends, those are things that you can build out in an LMS-focused experience. And I think mini programs are a great way to do that. But definitely something related to education is what I'd recommend. And I see a few questions, just one note, I see a few questions coming in about can we show the WeChat rankings? I will throw up my QR code here in a minute. If you scan my QR code, I'll actually go ahead and share that rankings file again so that you can access that. I think we have time for one more question. Let me pull it up here. Let's see if we have a few more. Here's one. I think we'll end with this one. And maybe, Patrick, this is a great one for you. It says, how do you suggest overseas asset managers build trust with Chinese investors? And what are the best ways to market to the Chinese investor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that a couple of things that, for overseas asset manager, they need to consider is, in China, as we mentioned, the competition is so huge with your peers from the overseas market and also the local markets. I think the first step is really think through your narrative. You may have your messaging narrative in overseas or in other developed markets, but China, you really need to think through what is your strategy, what's your narrative that really excites the local investors. People would expect you have a local commitment, your local team, research, compliance, and even the marketing team that really understand the Chinese audience. So that's one thing that you can start to build the trust with your audience in China and gradually build your profile. What's the best way to market to the Chinese investors? I think there are a couple of things that you have to ask yourself first. As we mentioned, there are different ways to operate in China right now. You can go as far as some of the firms doing the FMC license at the retail firm, but you can also go for a more unique or targeted approach, getting the QDLP WFI license, focusing on the high net worth first to test the water. That's what we have seen a lot of the overseas players to see how they can use some of their particularly more niche product to understand whether that will excite the interest from the high net worth investors. The other way that is those joint ventures. While you may not have your full ownership at the initial stage, but you can tap into some of the local distributors, banks, insurance companies to help you to build your profile, build your network in China. And then when you have built a critical mass and traction among the investors, then you can consider going for a more direct market approach. In terms of your messaging, how to market the investors, I think we highlighted a few things about WeChat, transparency, education. All these will work really well, especially if you are new players. Remember, in China, while you may be the largest one or the largest one in UK and US, in China, sometimes you're still a new player. So if you can share something that you have from a global market, from an education standpoint, thought leadership standpoint, that will be an easy opening for you to draw the attention with some of the local investors. We see a lot of new players in the markets. They will start with a WFI or they start with a QDLP. And then they use a lot of education for leadership content to build up the traction in WeChat and also different marketing channels. And gradually, when they become bigger, they are considering different model to really sell the retail product to the market. Hopefully that will be something that will be useful for you guys to consider, what is working for
Before we
overseas
close
data in
out
China.
then, I see a few comments that they weren't able to download the report. So let me share my screen and you should be able to see. Patrick, are you able to see my QR code? Great, go ahead and scan that QR code and I'll send you the full report. I see a few comments on that and we'll make sure that you're able to get the full brand report after this. If not, we'll make sure to email out both the presentation from today as well as the more detailed reports by FleishmanHillard and then our team at ChatLabs as well. So thank you for joining today. We appreciate everyone's time and feel free to reach out to Patrick, Cheryl, or myself, and we'd be happy to connect and help you further. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.